So, we know certain things. We know that God is merciful. Do we know that?
Yes.
We know that. And in the scriptures it says this all over. And we know that in Psalms it says God will judge in justice. That we know that God is merciful and He's just. Right? We also know one thing. In 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 4, it says God desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. So He desires for everyone to go to heaven. And He is merciful. And He is just. We know these things. And let's put next to them a few other facts that we know. We also know that Christ said, I am the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There's an exclusive claim. It's only through Christ. Okay? We also know from St. Peter when he said, this is the stone which you rejected, which has become the chief cornerstone, Jesus Christ. Nor is there any salvation in any other. For there's no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. So here's another exclusive claim through Jesus Christ. So we know that God is merciful, God is just, and God wants everyone to be saved. We also know that God, you can only go to heaven through Jesus Christ. Now, the question now remains, okay, I trust that God is merciful and just. He will, because He desires all to be saved, He will reveal Himself in one, like you said, one way, shape, or form to those who have never heard of Him. How? Read the first 3 chapters of Romans. Okay? And I seriously give you this exercise to do. Read the first chapter of Romans, talks about the revelation of God through His nature. And St. Paul said, man, or human, you are without any excuse. Because the nature, the world, speaks about the existence of God. You just have to look at a beautiful sunset, and you can't help but believe in the sunsetter. Okay? Nature. Nature, not faith. You can also say, well, what's the origin of the universe? Is it chance, matter, and time? You see? So it's not just faith. The second chapter of Romans talks about the revelation of God, not through the natural order, but through conscience. Why do I feel that nagging voice that makes me feel guilty when I do something wrong? Although you may have a paralyzed conscience that when you do a lot of things wrong, I don't feel this guilty feeling. But if you have a good conscience, you will have that revelation of God through conscience. The third chapter of Romans, God reveals Himself in the light of Christ, which is the specific revelation. So there's general revelation and there's particular revelation. Okay? General is the world and the conscience. Everyone has that. Specific is the light of Jesus Christ. So Christ is going to reveal Himself to each and every single one in His own way. This question implies that you are more compassionate about these people than Christ. And that's totally absurd. He's the one who died for them. He is far more compassionate about them than you and I. Don't you think He's going to try His best to save them? Here's the question. Rather than saying, what about those who've never heard of Christ? You should say, what have I done to those who have never heard of Christ? That's the question. You should, having received the particular specific revelation, you have received this blessing of the knowledge of the one true God. You should then be responsible to spread that knowledge, share the faith to those who have never heard, or else Christ wouldn't have given the evangelism commission to His disciples. Last thing I want to say to that is that Christ Himself was asked this question. And let's see what He said. He Himself was asked this question. Can you get Luke chapter 13 and see what Christ said to this question? If anyone had Luke chapter 13, verse 20. Actually, I can get it. Oh, you get it from you guys.
I have a question. What app do you guys use? Because mine is not working.
What if I give you an app?
I got it.
No, I know, but mine is
Mark's got it.
I got it.
Yeah.
I have
Okay,
it.
so,
Okay. No problem.
here.
Verse 20.
No problem.
Now you can,
Luke chapter
you can go to,
Again,
you can go to Luke 13. Okay, let's see it.
Verse
Marco?
20.
I got it.
Yeah. So let's see what it says. Luke chapter 13, verse 20 says, no, it's not verse 20. Okay, it's verse 22. It's okay. 22. Listen up. And he went through the cities and villages, teaching and journeying toward Jerusalem. Then one of his disciples said to him, Lord, are there few who are saved? So you know what that means? Are there few who are saved? In other words, can you please tell me the statistics of heaven? Are there going to be a lot of people there? Or little people there? In other words, who's going? Who's not going? Isn't this what the question implies? Listen to what Christ said. Strive to enter through the narrow gate. In other words, and it's none of your business. Can I ask you something, Jesus? Will there be few or many who will be saved? Strive to enter.
No,
Jesus,
he
you didn't
said a lot
mention.
of people won't.
Huh?
And he was straight up and said a lot of people won't.
Well, a lot of people,
It's like,
sure, because
not
he
a lot of
implied,
people.
he implied he said the narrow gate analogy. But what I'm trying to say is that when people start asking who's going to go to heaven, who's not going to go to heaven, you are basically putting on the cap of the judge. I want to know who's going to go here, who's going to go there. And that position is only God's position. We are not in the position to ask that question. I know this seems like it's a cop-out, or it's a non-answer. It is an answer. We are to be responsible for the revelation we were given. And no one will be judged to a revelation he wasn't given. We know that God is righteous. How can God judge someone based on something he didn't know? That would be unfair. And we know that God is fair. We'll leave it at that. So how are you going to reach him? Finish him to thou. I'm the God of the universe. I have my ways. But what about the tribes in Africa? I have my ways. We just have to trust that God is merciful and just.
And we're never going to know, like, what's the point of even...
And not only that, exactly, we're never going to know. And the question should drive us to help those who never heard. So the
You're
question should
so
be,
worried about them.
exactly,
Go.
exactly,
Go tell them.
exactly. Does that make sense, at least somewhat logically speaking? So we trust in God and we leave it at that. That's it. Yes, Christine.